This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about the 5th episode of Andor. It is titled The Axe Forgets. Is a guy who never forgets and wields a mighty axe. Drew Taylor.
On Twitter?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I know I don't have coffee. I still am sipping on my giant Coke from McDonald's from lunch. So I'm ready. I'm ready to talk Andor.
You sound refreshed. And I'm
refreshed.
excited to have you. It's always a pleasure. It's good to see you at D20 at the D23 Expo. I want to get that right.
We got to get that right.
In person for a while, so it was great to see you, pal.
I know it was. I missed out on a celebration this year, so I was so happy to get to see you and to hang out a little bit. I know we both had crazy schedules, but
yes, yeah,
a lot of Star Wars stuff at D23. Just kidding. There was absolutely no Star Wars stuff. Well, there was a little. There was like, here's Jude Law. He's in Skeleton Crew. Okay.
Well, the Indiana Jones stuff was pretty fantastic.
That was great, but not Star Wars. No movie. Still no movie.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that changes, but who knows what the powers that be have in mind. What I do know is that Andor, how's that for a transition, is really something unlike we've ever seen before. I haven't really gotten a chance to talk to you besides a few texts here and there. What do you think about Andor overall? Just the first 5 episodes, just kind of as one big sample.
I mean, I absolutely love the show. I mean, we saw the first 4 early, and I was just blown away, basically. And I just think it's the best. I really, really love it. And I think this. I mean, every week I think it gets better too. So. I just think it's the best. It's obviously, I think, the best TV show they've done. But maybe it is just the best Star Wars thing that Disney has done.
More than The Mandalorian?
Overstatement? Definitely more than The Mandalorian. I just jive with the, just a shameless plug. I have this Mission Impossible podcast. I love the kind of mechanics of the rebellion and this heist that they're planning and all that stuff. So I think more mature characters, a more complicated storyline. I just think it's great. I just think it's really great. I love Mandalorian for what it is, but this is just a whole new level, I think.
It's a different step. It's definitely a much more mature take. I like what you said about the mechanics, because there's a lot of intricate interweavings and interwoven nature of these characters. There's a lot of duality, and because there are 12 episodes, we've only seen 5. I'm assuming the heist will be in the next episode, or at least the beginnings of it, but who knows where they're going to go from there. But that's great. So you obviously love it. I love it too. So let's talk. So letter grade for this episode for you, and overall reactions to this particular episode. I think I know what you're going to say, but I'd love to hear.
I mean, I give this give this an A+ from me. I was so enveloped in the mechanics of this, but also Cyril at home with his mother. What is the bad Imperial officer's name? The blonde woman.
Oh, her name is it starts with a D. I knew it until you said that. It'll come to me.
Her whole story. I thought it was great. I hope we get back to I hope we get back to Andor's planet at some point, which I'm sure we will. That is my guess, is that the Empire will threaten Bix and some of his buddies on that planet. But for right now, I loved it. I just loved the episode so much.
Daedra Miro, M-E Miro.
Yes,
yeah. Daedra. So I give this an A+ completely, and I agree with you. I think it escalates, and every single episode gets a little bit more intense. And really, besides a little bit of episode 3, we haven't seen much action at all. That doesn't bother me. I feel like the slow burn, speaking of light the fuse, like this slow burn is really, really going to pay off in explosive ways. I agree with you about the mechanics, sort of the psychology of what it means to trust and putting your life on the line, and what are you fighting for is a really nice theme throughout this entire thing, and how they all react to that. We start this episode with Cyril in a very Star Cruiser looking apartment. He's with his mother. She is pouring him blue milk on his cereal. I mean, the place is so sterile. He's like a humbled little boy in this environment. Talk about what you notice here, because you do a lot of great reviews, of course, for this. I mean, do you ever sleep when there's a new Andor that comes out?
I got up early to watch it today. I loved just how sort of like belittling she was in those scenes, and just like, saving me the disappointment, and she has a friend that she can reach out to. I mean, it's really relatable and human in a way that I feel like Star Wars hasn't been for a little while. Like,
or ever.
You've either been in this position, somebody who's been in this position. It's absolutely humiliating. He doesn't have the kind of emotional facility to, properly cope and move on. And it was like a huge disaster, his whole attempt at getting Cassian. I mean, it was not great. It was a boondoggle. So, he's dealing with that. I just thought I thought that stuff was really great. And to me, that's the difference between this and something like The Mandalorian, which is, they would set up, okay, you got to go, steal these payroll forms or whatever. And then it would be over by the end of the episode. There would be no suspense. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but the amount of suspense that came from just a single TIE fighter, just kind of, hovering along the distance. It's just like, that stuff was really impressive to me. The way that the Gilroys and I think Susanna White directed this one as well.
Yes,
the way that
correct.
she staged all that stuff is just really, it's awesome. I was just blown away.
They're pulling off Star Wars without special effects. I mean, yeah, of course you have it for the TIE fighter, but even if you just heard the noise, that would be enough. That would be enough. And I feel like that's a pretty significant feat. I mean, I'm sure there are some special effects here and there, but for the most part, there's not a lot the gee whiz spectacle of what you typically think of when you think of Star Wars. Again, it's much more adult. Seeing this man very much browbeat in this toxic relationship with his mother. I love the scene. We keep talking about the cereal, or I do. He picks up like that little new version of Captain Crunch or whatever it is.
Right.
And as he's staring at it, she's telling him, the first thing people notice about you is if you're going to slouch or not, you might as well wear a sign that says, I promise to disappoint you. And he's just looking at her. We know that he is very capable of standing up to people. At least he does to people that he is superior to in his previous employment. But now we see very much things have changed a bit. And when that particular sequence starts, he's sitting on his bed in this very cold, dark apartment, and he's just staring out the window. And if you turn on the captions, it says that he's like whimpering as he's looking out the window.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was fascinating.
Well, I love, obviously looking at the cereal, it's kind of got a brown and blue color scheme, and it looks like a planet. Right? Yeah. So I think we're seeing the beginning of him kind of becoming a lone wolf kind of character. And there's plenty of people like this right now online complaining about Star Wars or complaining about She-Hulk or whatever. I mean, he's a really 2022 kind of guy in that regard. Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see what levels of desperation, he resorts to in terms of getting his man, because we see him kind of lonely and looking at the hologram later.
Yeah.
Just so much tension. It's just in every scene. And the mother, I mean, it's such a Norman Bates kind of thing where he's just this like loser at home and his mother is just haranguing him. And it's pretty wild. I loved that stuff. But, like the performances are the special effect in the show, right? Like that's what gives it that dazzle. Is these people are so great.
You should be a writer. You've really explained this quite well, I would say. I'm serious, man. I mean, of course, you're a great writer, and as we know, everybody knows that. So he keeps waiting for Uncle Harlow, even though he doesn't want to deal with Uncle Harlow. But then they transition out of that as she kind of carefully slides some food over to him. And then he has this run-in, and I should have looked up this guy's name, that has gone through his stuff in the middle of the night. Actually, I'm going to look it up right now while we're talking. His name is Arvel Skeen, Arvel, and Arvel has been charged with going through his stuff, seeing kind of what he has to hide. And this is a theme throughout this episode of tension between the two of them that gets nicely wrapped up later, or at least kind of piecemealed later. But what did you make about that opening sequence between those two?
Is this when he's like shirtless on the
yes.
outside of it? Yeah. I thought that scene was super interesting. And I love that they bonded over being in prison. Like that's another thing is like, these are such like blue collar guys, and Andor recognizes his tattoos, and
he's got a obviously there's tattoo and something else. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like there's a real understanding that they came from the same place. They still don't trust each other. I don't think maybe they will never trust each other. But yeah, I loved that scene. I thought that was a really great kind of intro to the episode too. I just thought it was wonderful.
And you get the sense that, and this is when we kind of get the explanation of the title, right?
Yes.
What is it? How does it go again?
He says that the axe forgets, but the tree remembers.
Yes. Yeah. How would you explain that metaphor?
Well, these are people who have been kind of beaten down by the system, and there's a really beautiful part later where one of the other rebels is saying, they hide behind multiple atrocities, that it becomes kind of like, that their evil is so all encompassing that it's hard to pinpoint exact examples of what they've done. And it's just amazing, because obviously the whole show, when it's done, we'll see the arc of Andor's radicalization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, not to jump ahead, but at the end, it's kind of revealed that he was paid to be there to help them, and he is still like very much a mercenary in the vein of Han Solo. And so, instead of one movie, we're going to get 24 episodes. Hopefully, should the second season come to pass, to see that transformation.
And then when we get out of that, we move into another awkward. I think the moments with Perrin and Mon Mothma and her daughter, and the moments with Cyril and his mother are as tense, if not more so, than anything with the Empire, because it's just like a great Greek tragedy. The parts that are more powerful that stand as a time are the things that are actually relatable to real people. There's so much tension here between Perrin and Mon Mothma. It's very, very clear. As a parent, you're supposed to work together, even if you don't always agree with everything your spouse. If you're not always on the same page, at least you put up a united front around children. But there's a lot going on with her daughter. She's going to go. Mon Mothma is going to take her to school or something like that. It's sort of unclear. Maybe I need to watch that part again. And then she says, "No, you're just basically using me like as a dog and pony show." I mean, what can you say besides the fact that it's beautifully done? The set is gorgeous. And Perrin clearly spends more time on his appearance than his relationship with his wife.
Yeah. And he doesn't know the name of the chauffeur.
That's right. The driver.
Yeah.
Which is a source of contention for her, because she obviously is someone who cares about the people, because she's the future leader of the rebellion.
But it's all about like the cost of that commitment, right? Like, how much are you willing to give up for the greater good? And she's willing to kind of like abandon her family in a way. So I thought that was really great. That's what I was thinking about. It's like, oh my God, she has to she's living multiple lives within this, society. And we saw last episode, wonderful kind of spy craft that she and Stellan Skarsgård are up to.
Yeah, Lucy.
But yeah, I just thought it was really cool, and really made me think about like what it would take to, you know, commit yourself so fully to something like that. You know, it's just,
yeah,
it's a lot.
It is a lot, but it even goes a step further, because this is clearly not a healthy dynamic. These three, this is not a tricycle that's driving smoothly down the road, because she right away, you know, her daughter says to her dad, "I thought you were taking me." He goes, "You're gonna have to clear it with her." Like, she's almost not in the room, completely no support at all. And then the daughter says something like, you know, "You're only doing this to show me off. Nobody cares. You can relax." Mon Mothma reacts and says that she's hurt by it. And then her daughter says, "Well, that's my point. You're making it all about you." But that's like a classic toxic dynamic, isn't it? Where the immature one thinks the opposite of what is actually going on. Clearly, there's no support. Do they really think that Mon Mothma is all about the outward appearance? I mean, if that is in fact true, then she's not only fooling the Empire, but she's also fooling her family. And does that erode the family dynamic, or was her husband already kind of a jerk to begin with? I mean, I guess that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen images from various trailers and stuff of them at a dinner party and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really ready for this to explode. But you're right. I mean, these kind of like, to have a domestic drama, really multiple domestic dramas kind of nestled in a Star Wars story is pretty awesome. I love that.
I do too. And we have to say again, look, this is not the Star Wars we grew up with. It's very, very different. In fact, sometimes I wrestle pleasantly, and this is a good, fun little thing to think about. And again, I think it's silly to even consider it before we've got the entire piece. But how does this fit into a world with Luke Skywalker and Anakin Skywalker saying yippee? I mean, it's just so drastically different in tone. But I guess, and you would know this better than I, because you've been writing about this kind of stuff for years. Marvel's done this for a long time, and they've obviously pulled it off in spades.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there has been a kind of homogenization of Star Wars, especially under the kind of watchful eye of Dave Filoni. And to me, this is really nice that it shows that there are multiple types of stories in the Star Wars galaxy that you can tell. I think that's very refreshing and very heartening, probably for creators to know as well, that there are, you know, different stories out there, and this kind of like suspense drama can go alongside a more kind of outward adventure like Mandalorian, and who knows what else is out there. I would love to see, you know, if there's a horror story out there, if there's a romantic comedy story out there. I mean, that's sort of what Visions too showed, is like, oh no, the elasticity of the Star Wars universe is something that's kind of been untapped in recent years. So
right, I like that.
Good to see.
It is good to see. It's really, really cool. Then we go to a scene where they're all kind of sitting around this, having breakfast, I guess. And Cassian is talking with Karis Nemec. And Karis is he's very young. He's always been very welcoming from the beginning. He seems to be the only one in this group that doesn't have some sort of a hard edge to him. And he starts to read sort of his manifesto to Cassian about all the reasons why, what is wrong. He says it's easier to hide behind 40 atrocities in a single incident. He's got all these
there it is.
Descriptions.
You've got the quote for me. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Well, talk to me about that quote.
I mean, I just thought it was really powerful, and it speaks to the kind of like uphill battle of this rebellion. Like, how could you even like, you know, think about trying something? And that's why I think that it's so interesting that they're putting so much pressure on something as seemingly mundane as lifting these time cards or tax reports or whatever it is that they're trying to get out of this facility.
The payroll.
That's what it is.
What is it, a month of Imperial payroll? I think it's a month. It's a significant amount. Yeah.
So it's like, well, that's not exciting. I mean, that's not a, you know, coaxium or whatever the hell they, are lifting in Solo. But it's important.
And then on the Smuggler's Run.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the Smuggler's Run. Yeah. So it's important that these little kind of tactical, things that dismantle, which we also hear about later on, that there have been multiple kind of heists around Imperial space that are starting to add up to something greater. It's pretty fascinating. I love it. I love that idea.
I do too. I love the next sequence where they're trying to figure out the weight of this ship, whether it's on a rail, is it mounted, whatever. And he can't believe that they didn't already think this through. So as tightly constructed as this band of miscreants are when approaching the mighty Empire, there's still some things that they're just like Vel's playing, like, we knew it would be messy, but I think, we would have figured it out. And he's like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to pilot this thing. If my butt is on the line, I'm going to be the one in charge. And they just relent. It's kind of cool how he is slowly, granted, it's a really small amount of time, just what is it, 3 days, 4 days, something like that. He's slowly kind of becoming the leader. But I think the best reason why he's becoming more effective is he's not interested in leading. This is just kind of like, look, I see it this way. You don't have to do what I want. I don't care, but I'm going to do this because I want to survive. And you mentioned Han Solo. He's kind of got that roguish nature, but he's completely hard-nosed. Like, there is zero charm about Cassian Andor, which makes this show more realistic, I think, and ironically appealing too.
Yeah, you're totally drawn into him because he's so sympathetic and he's so broken. And I think what's interesting too about that scene is that he has the technical expertise because he also knows where the hatch is or whatever, or the lever or whatever that's going to dismount this train or ship or whatever it is that he's getting into. We haven't really seen it yet.
A load clutch is what they say. A
load clutch. These guys in this little cell have the kind of ideological understanding of this mission, and he has the kind of technical know-how to get it done. And it's a really interesting mesh. And I think at some point, obviously, there will be kind of a transference. Well, they'll know sort of technically more about how to pull off these jobs, and he will become a true convert to the cause in a way that he wasn't before.
Right. There's a quick sequence with the gentleman, Lieutenant Gorn, who is their basically behind the scenes man. He's a traitor to the Empire, I suppose. It looks like he's inspecting, I don't know, some place where the Imperials are just hanging out for fun, for poops and giggles, I guess. So there's quick cutaways between that, and then we jump back to the gentleman who's also in charge. I can't think of his name now. He has almost a run-in with Cassian where Cassian says, don't touch him. If you want something, you tell me. Like, Cassian still got that, lay off me, dude. Like, I am not going to be pushed around. And they relent to him, which, of course, that makes sense to me. But then I love the transition. I'm kind of rambling here. I love the transition to, can you march? And then there's different shots of Imperials marching, and, hey, we're going to set up our hotel here. I think Cassian says in the second or third episode, the Empire is basically fat and lazy. And they take everything for granted, very conceited. Where then you jump back to Cassian and everybody kind of in the dirt and the mud and the grime marching. And then Cassian does something really, really cool that I noticed, maybe you noticed the first time too. Everybody's got if you're left-handed, switch sides. And I just love that little sequence. I feel like it says a lot about communication and how astute Cassian is without spilling it out for the audience.
Yeah, it's a wonderful character moment. And him, when she's like, well, who here is left-handed and who's right-handed? And he goes through the whole group, and then he says, you have to draw with your opposite hand and all that stuff. It was great. He's a character who has been completely beaten down and kind of underestimated his entire life, from being a orphan to hooking up with the Fiona Shaw character to being in prison to being in the army. I mean, he's always been kind of looked down upon and undervalued, and for him to finally assert himself in a way that impresses somebody else, I thought was really powerful.
It was super cool. Like, he favors right, but he shoots left. And she just starts quizzing him. And then this is the sequence after that, where you talked about a little bit earlier, where that tie shows up, and the suspense is great. They have to hide their blasters, and then the tie like kind of pulls a Maverick and swoops down and does like kind of a flyby. I thought that was the end. I wonder if that's going to come back later, if that's just some Imperial hot dogging, because they do talk later in the show about how the Empire is very dismissive of the locals on this planet, which is nothing new to Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to talk about that scene, is that the next scene that we get?
Yeah.
It's pretty close, isn't it? So that scene was really interesting because he's their man inside, but he also has this secret that he fell in love with a woman on that planet who was killed or misplaced or displaced, or I mean, they're no longer together. And so for him to kind of have to listen to this kind of like racist, baloney that these guys are spouting, it really shows you where the kind of seeds of rebellion can spring from in the Star Wars universe. And what's so great about what they're doing with Andor is they're making everything so personal and so granular so that you really understand where it came from. I think that was kind of something that, especially in the sequel trilogy, you kind of just didn't understand. Okay, why is the rebellion still going on? How did the First Order come to be, and why are they using all the Empire's stuff? And it's like,
right,
it's a little bit puts you at a little bit of a distance emotionally.
And why do we care about Hosnian Prime blowing up when we've never heard anything about it?
When we've never heard of, but we do hear about it.
That's at a major
episode.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. When Deirdre is talking, and there's actually some great little Easter egg things and references to other things going on in the world of Star Wars. In fact, I'm pulling it up here now to see if I can get the specific names. I believe they mentioned Jakku. Yeah. So from in this timeline, we've never heard anything about anything happening in Jakku, but there's something there, or there will be something there in a future comic book or a story.
Apparently, there was a secret Empire base on Jakku. That was in one of the books or something. I read.
Oh, I wonder if that was an aftermath. That might have been an aftermath. But they mentioned Kessel. They mentioned Fondor, which doesn't spring to mind right away. Targeting consoles from Jakku, and then from the base cave, the Steerguard Star Path. I'm not sure. I'm sure other people have looked into this right now. But I like how Deirdre's like, this is too spread out to be organized. But then I believe her companion says it's too random to be random. Does that sound right to you? Something like that?
Yeah. He was great.
Mm-hmm.
I love this kind of like, Gestapo unit of the Empire that we get to see for the first time. And I also love that she is like popping amphetamine seemingly of the Star Wars universe to stay
Maybe
awake.
Some breath mint.
I don't think it was a breath mint. But I mean, to draw the parallel, that amphetamines were a huge part of the Nazi war machine. So I thought that was really interesting. And again, another just level of adult and character that we have not seen before. We have not seen someone take a pill in Star Wars, and now we have because of the show. It's pretty awesome. I think it's really, really interesting.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Again, the humanity and the realism. Plus, I we didn't see like a human side of Grand Moff Tarkin or any other Imperials. Tarkin was the only one that really spent any significant amount of time with, and even that was very, very limited. So to see it from that perspective, and it's almost like they can portray them as almost like they're the good guys, because in their minds they are the good guys, aren't they?
Yeah,
and that's like the classic trope. We jump back to the mother, whose name is Edie, Eedy. Cyril's sitting there looking at his cereal, dumping it out on his spoon. And his mother's basically saying, we never really thought that police work was your plan. We don't really know what to do with you. Cyril continues to sit there and allow himself to be browbeat. It's just more squirmy stuff, but then we're getting closer and closer to when it's time for, and that is a bit of a confrontation, I would say, where, what's his name? Arvel sneaks up behind Cassian with a knife and takes his Kyber crystal from him. And, well, I guess there's actually something before that goes on, but
I was actually wondering if you could explain this moment to me a little bit better.
Sure.
Because he says this thing about like, why are you here if you have treasure? It must be that Kyber is some kind of, if not a diamond, then something else similarly kind of rare, or whatever. And yeah, I thought that was really interesting, and I was wondering what your reading of that was.
I mean, Kyber is, of course, the crystal that powers lightsabers. It's also the what is used to fuel the Death Star's laser. And it's insanely rare in the world of Star Wars. It's probably the rarest gem or stone that exists in the Star Wars galaxy, to my knowledge. So the fact that he has one that's worth 300,000 credits, I believe they say. He's like, well, and because he doesn't announce yet when this is revealed, about money. But I think my guess is he's thinking, why do we need this money when you've got this much around your neck? Like, we're risking our necks and you've got something that's so valuable right here. Like, we don't even have to do this. That's one possibility. And also along the lines of, why, if you're rich, why are you slumming it with us and trying to destroy the Empire? Maybe there's an association, which wouldn't surprise me, of wealth equals you're an oppressor.
Evil. Yes, yeah. Of course. Right. Yeah, that was really interesting. Because you're right, we haven't really seen Kyber discussed that much.
It's the only mention or reference to the Force in any way, shape, or form, and that's just that Kyber crystal that he's got. That's it.
Right. And again, it's the most spiritual thing about him, really.
Yes.
Because he's not
he's not the praying sort.
No, he's not like our boys at the Temple of the Wills. He is much more removed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing, and that Kyber crystal is, I think, even like a rarer version or something, right? It's like he's like, it's the sky blue whatever.
Yeah, blue like, stone or something. Yeah, that was a new explanation I'd never heard before.
So I thought that was really interesting. But yeah,
I love it, and I think that I'm glad you brought that as a topic of discussion, because I hadn't considered that before. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Whenever we see Lieutenant Gorn, and he's talking with his crew, I love how he kind of subtly encourages them to be like, you know what? No, we want to be on the surface. We want to see the eye open. We want to see this like natural elemental power that only happens every couple of years. And Gorn smiles because he knows that that's going to help execute their plan. But then this is when we get into the fight. This is when he is ambushed. And he says, I knew you were lying. I just don't trust you. And the actual line that he says, look, he's got Kyber. It's called Sky Kyber, which again, heard before. It talks about how it's glowing and valuable. So he says, he comes here with nothing but the clothes on his back and still worth 30,000 credits. So why does it bother him? He says it's just another reason to not trust him. And then Cassian has this amazing way that he diffuses the entire thing. He's like, you know what? I'll kill you if you don't give me that. And then he basically talks his way out of it by saying, I'm going to try to get to the exact thing. He says, you can't live with it. If you can't live with it, that's fine. I'll wash away and I'll wish you luck. But here's what this thing is. I'm not going to walk and look over my shoulders because I don't trust any of you. That is completely, that makes sense to me. But the thing that really sells it for me is when he says, hold on, let me find it here. I know who you are. I know who I am. Yeah, the money is nice, but you're the one who's afraid. And Cassian says, yeah, I am afraid, but there's a difference between being fearful and losing your nerve. But if you want to get out of it, that's fine, but don't use me as an excuse. He really pulls some great psychological ideas here that are very high level thing, and it shuts it all down. Completely shuts it all down. I had to rewind that several times because I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, this is the beginning, the true beginning, I feel like, of his journey to where he is in Rogue One, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to juxtapose this character with the guy that shot an informant in cold blood in that movie. So, yeah, I mean, it's just such a wonderful character study. It's just great. I love it so much.
Then I do too. And there's really not a ton left other than the apology that Arvo gives. It's very an unorthodox policy. Look, this is why I hate the Empire. They ruined my brother and his farm, and he basically committed suicide. He fills his pockets with stones on a boat and he drowns because he just couldn't deal with it anymore. He says, look, that's the closest to an apology as you're going to get. And Cassian's like, what is he saying? Like, that'll do, or that's good enough for me. And I feel like feel like they're good, but this is like, I don't know, it's so dude centric, but like in the best way possible, because it's very honest. I've been hurt. This is why I'm a jerk. This is why I don't trust. This is why I hate the Empire. And to be honest, I don't trust you, Cassian, Andor, or whatever your name is. Your name is Clem, actually, in this, because money isn't enough of a reason for you to do all this stuff. But obviously, Cassian is not putting down all of his cards. I really thought, Drew, in that moment, I thought he does admit the money thing, which I thought was massive and huge. But his other secrets, I feel like there's probably not too many people that know besides that silly droid B2 that everyone seems to be really excited about.
I really love B2. Can we talk about how great B2 is?
Please.
I think he's great. I mean, I think he's really, really
red. He's really
funny,
red.
And he's kind of like beaten down by life. I felt very connected to that aspect of it.
You're much more charming.
Great. Well, yeah. I mean, he's kind of an energy vampire, to use another term of from what we do in the shadows. But I mean, that what I love about the droid is that it is totally aesthetically in line with the rest of Andor, in the sense that he is kind of a junkyard dog type character, like a kind of a family dog. And I just think he's really cool, and I love his design and how he can kind of move around. His kind of like segmented body that he could turn around, and I was just very, very impressed.
Well, I'm glad. Well, so then at the end, the torch is lit. There's a signal, and this is around the moment where I'm thinking to myself, "Oh no, it's going to be over." I feel like that's a mark of a great show. Like when you can end every episode with people clamoring for more, you're doing your job as a storyteller. And then just when you think you're not going to see Luthen, he's worried, he's angsty about this big thing that's going to go down. And we haven't spent a lot of time with Luthen, but he always seems very cool and in control. Here he seems nervous and human, and he's talking with his assistant, and he's like, she says, we're going to be ready. It'll all be over this time tomorrow. And then he says two things. He says, or it's just going to be, it's just one thing he says, or it's just going to be starting. Like, this is the big first blow. It gets a little confusing because the timeline is all over the place between this and Rebels and Solo, and everything going on in this series and Rogue One. But I mean, the first major blow is, of course, stealing the Death Star plans and blowing up the Death Star, because that changes everything. But you got to get through a lot before you get to this point. This may be, in fact, the first time the growing rebellion makes a giant name for itself, and maybe this is how we start getting everybody together, like we see later in the first, or all the entire series of Star Wars Rebels. I don't know, but it ends absolutely beautifully. Luthen turns off the radio, walks away, and then boom, we get the credits. It's how quick is it? It's only it's a 39-minute episode before you get to the credits themselves, which are like 6 minutes and 22 seconds long, but it packs a massive punch.
Well, can we talk about that exchange between him and the other woman there? Because what I thought was interesting was that there's times in that moment where you feel like she's maybe the leader. Like he, it's kind of been established that he's the one kind of going out, and he found Cassian, and he's got this crazy ship that can do all this stuff. And it's like, well, she really is in control in that scene. And she feels, and until that point, you thought maybe she could have been just a shop girl in his antique store. So I thought that was a really interesting shift, that dynamic. And it's also it just speaks to this whole theme in the show of like, the book, you don't judge a book by its cover. Don't underestimate the working class people or the people that you just walk by and forget, and you don't know the name of the chauffeur and all this stuff. It's like,
right.
There is real power there, and there's power in every kind of like strata of this rebellion. So don't take anybody for granted.
Relationships and the individual are what matter, and Mon Mothma sees that, and I like her character much more than I expect. I mean, I've always appreciated her and understood that she's important, but in this series, and which makes sense because you're spending more time with them, I really like her a lot more. One thing I know I always like is talking to you, my friend, and I really appreciate
Thanks for having me.
Of course, coming on the show, all of your petitions and your online GoFundMe to get you back on the show worked. Congratulations to you.
Yeah, my OnlyFans page was blowing up to come back on the show. It's just feed stuff. Don't worry. But, I think I want to.
Now I am worried.
I get a commitment to you on the air.
Yeah.
I get to come back and talk about the finale. That's what I want to do. I want to look at this season in total, really break it down. Maybe it can be a little bit longer episode. We break down everything we liked, we disliked about the first season of Andor, part 1 of 2. And
I like it.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Hey, you got an open spot, my friend. It's more about your schedule than anything. You're the man with the plan, interviewing Tom Cruise and touring the world.
I don't know about all that, but yes, we did talk to Tom Cruise. If your interests intersect from Star Wars to Mission Impossible, please, and Top Gun Maverick, please come on by. Light the Fuse, which is a podcast I host with Charles Hood about the Mission Impossible franchise. And if you like animation, come listen to Fine Tuning, starring your fellow cohort Jim Hill.
That's right.
And I don't know how else. And you can follow me on Twitter, Drew Tailored, like a tailored shirt.
That's right.
I think that's it. That's all I have to plug today, I guess.
Well, I think that's pretty significant. I mean, I love reading your reviews. I love hearing you with Jim, and Light the Fuse is legitimately deliciously entertaining, and the two of your chemistry and your enthusiasm for everything that is going on in the world of Tom Cruise and Top Gun and everything with Mission Impossible. I feel like I said this to you before, but I'll say it again on the show. That interview that you had with Cruise and everybody that worked on that, all the Zoom bombs and all that, it was a master class in how film works. And I absolutely loved it, man. It's just like an absolutely must listen to.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I do think that's one of the good things about the show is we talk to everybody involved in these movies. We had Cruise on, which was amazing, but we have talked to visual effects supervisors and costume designers and, composers, editors, which, we should talk about how good Nicholas Britell's score is for Andor too, especially that piece of music that went into the credits. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't know where the soundtrack album is or if it's coming or what, but yeah, it's really something else.
That's great.
Yeah. But yeah, we try to shout out everybody that worked on these movies and were so instrumental in making them great. So if you're interested in filmmaking, I think it's a lot of, behind the scenes, granular stuff about the way these movies are made. So And we've had a lot of Star Wars crossover too. So
yes, absolutely. Well, hey, man, thanks again for having a cup of coffee or a Coke from lunchtime from McDonald's with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.